The following is brought to you by the PLD Projects Network. It's me, it's PLD. PLD. PJ Campbell. Two mediocre white dudes on film. Because frankly, we know you don't have enough of that in your life. So we're here to give you more. And without further ado, here are two mediocre white dudes on film.
Well, it's that time again, and you guys are in for a very special episode of Two Mediocre White Dudes on Film, where PJ and PLD are hungover as shit because of Trust and her goddamn show over on the New Zealand network.
Sip or spill behind the scenes on the Schmodown. And if you did watch that, then you heard a little bit, at least a little bit of what's going to go on in this episode, because it did come up a few times. We had just watched the show, or watched the movie rather, before we went on. And we actually had a text chain about it, which is something we notably do not do usually. We don't do it.
Yeah.
But for whatever reason, we were very impassioned to talk about a couple things in here, such as Bud. That is one thing that I talk about a lot. Yeah. We're going to get into Bud.
We're going to get into all of the 1981's Halloween 2 today, because there's a lot to talk about, actually. And, up top, before we kind of get into all of it, one of the things that we wanted to notate, and you and I were talking about it off camera before we were recording, or off mic, or whatever you want to call it, rather.
Behind the scenes, behind the curtain.
Yeah. The very interesting thing about doing this is that Halloween 2 has always been, like, very notably considered one of the great horror sequels, but we try really hard to, like, look at stuff in the vacuum of itself in its own movie. So we are going to do that. But I think that there is something to be said about the fact that over time, because we've gotten so many other Halloween sequels, in particular, we've gotten other versions of Halloween 2, if you will. Because of that, I'm going to be a little harder on this movie than I would have been in the past, because I think that my feelings on it for the first time really changed in my rewatch. And I think you kind of had the same feelings, because it was the first time, at least for me, and I think I said this to you in, like, this big text exchange that we had. I think this was the first time that I wished that this movie didn't exist.
Yeah, in a way, same. There's a couple of key points that I thought of as a precursor to this episode and to try to judge this movie. Like you said initially, it was about, you try to judge the film for what it is and not compare it to others. But then again, it's hard to do that when you have a franchise like Halloween, which has a lot of ups and has a lot of downs. And you look at this thing, and I probably end up ranking this quite often, ranking it higher than it should be, because I do have films I definitely like less. So I can't, if you're going to put it on some kind of bell curve scale, I obviously can't put this too low, because I can't say it's only 1 point better than such and such a film or whatever. Funny enough, they're both directed by Rick Rosenthal. But we'll get to that. But also, it's kind of one of those films that's a special category in my heart. It's a film that the longer I go without seeing it or without giving it a rewatch, I build it up in my mind that it's probably pretty good. It should be pretty good, because in the culture around us, this is considered generally speaking, a decent sequel, not offensive, not as egregious as some of the other sequels, which in some ways is true, but that's kind of overstated.
I mean, it's definitely true to a point, I suppose. Right. But at the same time, and we'll get into it much deeper, I do think it's also as egregious as some of the other sequels in other capacities.
Yes, and in some ways worse, because I always go into this film wanting to love it. I want to love this film, and every time at the end of it, I'm like, I didn't love this film. And there's no reason this shouldn't have worked in a way. I mean, besides the obvious fact of capturing a lightning in a bottle is impossible, following up one of the greatest horror films of all time is going to be a steep chase anyways. You have all the right successful ingredients in place. It's like, John Carpenter
The
might not be
entire
directing
crew is
it.
basically back.
The entire crew is back. John Carpenter might not be directing, but he's still heavily involved. He still wrote the film with Deborah.
He's still directing portions of it.
He handpicked Rick Rosenthal as a director, and he does actually direct part of it himself. You have Jamie Lee Curtis back, who's a Scream Queen. You have Donald Pleasance back, and, well, as we'll get into it, Donald Pleasance basically helps keep this movie from sinking completely. But everybody's back. Dean Cundy's back. Everybody's back. And they made a ballsy choice, which is the one I think we want to talk about right up top, is the ballsy choice of just not only continuing the series, but literally continuing the film as if there's no time passing. This is legitimately right after Halloween ends, Halloween 2 begins. Now, frankly,
not Halloween Ends that comes out in October, by the way. We're talking about the ending of the original 1978 Halloween, not to be confused with the film that has not been released yet.
Correct.
There's so much to talk about with this movie, but before we get into that, I got some stuff I got to talk to you about.
That's it. Because we can't disappoint our fans who want to hear us bantering.
No. Because look, the last episode was 3 hours long almost, and we didn't do almost any tangenting. Well, we did. But it was about the franchise on a bigger scale. But I got a bone to pick with the internet.
Well, you always have a bone to pick with the internet.
Yeah, but it's a new bone to pick.
New bone. Okay. Different bone. Ankle bone
this time.
Hip bone.
Brain.
Coccyx.
Brain skull bone.
Skull bone. Okay.
Skull bone. Because I think that a bunch of these people are missing their brains or that part of their psyche and being, because I'm going to be honest with you, I'm exhausted by the conversation currently happening around Thor Love and Thunder and Taika Waititi in particular, who the internet has now fucking turned on and decided is actually evil incarnate. And I'm not sure what the fuck happened between early last week and today, but somewhere along the way, the entire film sphere seemed to turn on a dime on Taika because of Love and Thunder.
It's amazing how quick people do turn. Taika went from the savior of the franchise and of Thor in general, and some of the people looking forward to, oh great, a Star Wars movie. Oh great, I can't wait to see what this film genius does next. And then all of a sudden, 2 days later, this guy is the worst director since Rian Johnson.
Mm-hmm. Which, by the way, imagine putting Ryan and Taika as bad directors. Number one, shame on you.
Right?
They're no Rick Rosenthal.
That's very true. Very true. Sorry, Rick. I don't mean any offense, but it's true.
Oh, I mean all the offense. I mean it all.
He seems like a nice guy. But
yeah, I mean, he does feel like he's a nice enough dude. I wouldn't mind having beers with him, but also please never direct. Yeah. Well, he hasn't directed a movie since 2013, so I feel like that says a lot. Yeah. It's just really fascinating because the truth is I really liked Love and Thunder. I walked out and I thought I had loved it, but in hindsight, I cooled down on it a little bit, but not in a bad way. It was just it's a very good movie. It was fun. I had a really good time with it. It was fully Taika doing Taika in the MCU, even more so than Ragnarok. Marvel just kind of let him do his thing. It's a fun movie. And yet people are acting like this is the holy fucking Bible, and they're super fucking angry about it on the internet, and I don't understand.
I understand. I really don't understand either, because it's not that different from Ragnarok in a lot of ways. It's the same kind of thing. It's got a balance of humor, a balance of action, balance of adventure. Yeah, there are slightly different pieces to it. I remember reading one review about it, though, which actually made sense, that they kind of had a similar argument that we had. It's kind of well, Ragnarok in a way is worse because the humor came off of even more severe events. They'd have the entire death of a race, a genocide of a race, and they'd have humor after it. So the humor comes off of this more personal feelings kind of movie. It seems like it's okay in comparison in a way. I will argue also, real quick, I'll say it here. And you probably heard about this yesterday on Class Action, because we're actually, I don't know. Once again, you're listening.
Are we time traveling again? We
are time traveling again. Tomorrow for me, yesterday for your listener or my listeners, we're covering Thor Ragnarok versus Thor Love and Thunder. You're going to find out that I unabashedly, absolutely, without reservation, without hesitation, and perhaps even partially because of all the hatred I've heard, loved this movie without end. I think it's one of my favorite. It's top 5 MCU. I think I ranked it right underneath, like maybe number 4, just over Multiverse of Madness, which I also love. But this movie, I get why people don't like it. I get why people aren't for it. I don't get the absolute hatred for it, because I can't fathom why you would hate it. Say it's not for you and get out of there. That's all I need to do. But this for me was a perfect 80s vibing sci-fi action adventure, parts a little bit of a kids movie thrown in there. I absolutely had a shit-eating grin on my face the entire movie.
Well, it's so funny too, because like I said, I really enjoyed the movie. And here's the other thing. I think that I've heard some people who have said that they don't understand the point of the movie, and I can't imagine missing the point of the movie so hard when it's bashing you in the face that the only thing that matters. I know. It's literally the title. Love. Like, it's really, really fucking simple. The entire movie is about love. I don't want to get into spoilers, obviously.
No.
In all
it's about
of it,
choosing love. It's about choosing love in front of everything.
The movie couldn't be more clear in what it's trying to say. And the other thing I'm finding is there are people who are like real upset that they have a joke in the movie, or not a joke rather, but there's a moment when they go to the new Asgard and you see that there's an Infinity Scoops ice cream parlor, and people are super mad about it. And they're like, imagine having this fucking ice cream parlor that is got the Infinity Gauntlet and the stones and the thing that ruined the universe. And I'm going, did you all like sleep through watching Endgame, where they use the gauntlet to bring back life and the stones to bring back life? And that's a whole point. Like, it turns out that it was also used for good. I swear to God, dude, media literacy is beyond dead at this point, and it's exhausting.
Yes, it really is. And that's why I choose most of the time not to engage. I don't engage very much anymore. I engage with people like who are like-minded enough with me. I'm not saying I don't listen to other people's arguments. I will, but if you start getting like zealous about it, I'm just going to tune you out. I'm just not going to. Not worth it.
And I don't engage either. I just see it happening. And then I come on here and I complain about it because I don't want to get into it on the space of Twitter or whatever else, because I don't want to deal with it. I don't want to deal with these people.
I just turned on the love and said, fuck it. Like, I saw every review I read, I go, Thor being the worst thing since whatever, blah, 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 blah. And I sat there, I went, yep, that's great. I unabashedly absolutely loved it. Had a great time. Can't wait to see it for a third time. And I will get a little snarky here real quick. This is the worst Thor movie. Thor: The Dark World does exist. Just want to let you know.
Dude, have you not seen the internet trying to rehabilitate that movie?
Yes.
Over the last month and a half? What the fuck?
What the fuck has happened? I don't know. I have no idea. It's very confusing to me.
You people are so goddamn spoiled that you think that things like Thor: Love and Thunder and The Last Jedi are actually bad movies, when actual like bad comic book movies and movies about space exist. It is mind-boggling to me that we live in a world where people get so hung up on a movie like Love and Thunder that they're calling it one of the worst comic book movies of all time, like Steel doesn't fucking exist. Like, come on, you guys. Do you not remember the comic book movies we used to live through? You know that there's an actual bad fourth film in a franchise called Superman 4: The Quest for Peace? Please see your fucking hyperbole out the door and like actually live in reality. We have got to stop doing this thing where there's only black and white between answers. Everyone wants to think that everything is black and white and that's it. There's like no room for anything not binary. And movies are not a binary thing. And I think I've said this to you in the past. I don't know if I've ever said it on here. The biggest thing is I think people do not realize that most movies are inherently average to good.
Yep.
There is very little that is very bad or excellent. Right. Everything else lives in a gray area of pretty good to great.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'll go with that one part.
And I think, I mean, are there movies
that
average? Love?
Sure. I think there's a solid average film. That's why we Star Wars. There's like this film that's like you go to it, you watch it, it is fine if you're eating popcorn by. You'll probably never want to watch it again. But like,
or if it's raining and you're watching TNT.
You might not. Yeah, you might not turn it off. It comes on the TV. All right, sure, whatever. I'll put it on. You probably want to actively seek to look at it again, watch it again.
U.S. Marshals is a perfect example of that,
Yeah,
right?
Absolutely.
It's a sequel to a movie. It's a movie that is a sequel to an Academy Award-winning film that we all love in The Fugitive.
Right.
Like, The Fugitive is one of the all-time great thrillers. It's just an excellent, excellent film.
Right.
U.S. Marshals was a totally fine follow-up that exists. It's not good. It's not bad. It's just kind of there, and it's
righteous.
Fun. God bless. It's just very funny to me because I think that we've totally lost the plot. And I think that this like tribalism between people and things is really sad and frustrating. And I'm kind of sick of it. And it's funny because here you and I are doing a podcast where we're like breaking movies down. And we went like scorched earth on a movie like Annabelle. But you know why? Because Annabelle was actually like actively a very bad movie.
Yes. Agreed, and that's the case.
Yeah, and I would argue between you, and whoever's listening, I don't think there's truly a bad MCU movie. I think there are ones that are less good than others, obviously, but I would not say that there's a truly bad MCU movie other than there are people who make the argument about Iron Man 2 and Thor the Dark World, but even then I would say that those are very average at best, and I'm one of the people who actually likes Iron Man 2 more than the original.
I know you are. You're a very strange breed when it comes to that, I'm not going to lie. But I love you for it. Hey, do what you do, man. Whatever you
look,
like.
Man, it's look, I'm not going to make any excuses for it, and I know I'm in a minority opinion on it, and it's totally cool. It's just like the Justin Hammer of it all is a big part of it for me. I like the villain aspect more. I don't think Iron Man has aged very well comparatively. And I think Iron Man 2 has gotten better because of the stuff surrounding it. Like, is it a hindsight's 2020 thing? Yes, absolutely. But that hindsight matters in a cinematic universe, right? Et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah, I get that. I agree with that. I will also say, like, it doesn't matter if it's good. Like, I agree with you that there's been very rare, like a bad, even though I just said the other day, I just about a few minutes ago, I said, that Thor the Dark World exists. I can watch Thor the Dark World and still have popcorn and have a good old time. I don't skip it when I watch the MCU rewatch. If I do an MCU rewatch, it's nothing to skip.
People forget like Blade Trinity is actually a bad movie. People forget that X-Men The Last Stand is actually a bad movie.
Yeah,
like there are actual bad movies based on Marvel comic books. I would say that Marvel Studios has pretty much been batting 1,000 just in getting like an average film across home base. And there's a reason that we're now almost 30 films deep in all the now the TV show side, on the other hand, I have not liked all the TV shows. I've been very honest about that. I didn't love Moon Knight. I thought Hawkeye was totally fun and okay, but not like super great. WandaVision was great. Loki was great. Falcon and Winter Soldier, totally fine. But again, I also would say that they were at least averagely good.
There's nothing I hated. I didn't hate any of them, to be honest with you.
I am begging people.
Last time.
Yes. And I am begging the internet to like stop seeing stuff in black and white and actually conversing about things. Because I think you get a lot more out of that. You will. I promise you.
I will even argue that there is a case for being overly positive about stuff as well. Some people go, because it is a black and white thing. It's either you hate it or you love it, and that's part of the problem too. And I am guilty of that to a degree, but I'd rather be guilty of loving something a lot than not. But I'm not going to go across, like I said, to the Thor Love and Thunder fans. People will come to me, tell me how much they hate it. I'm going to say, that's great. I loved it, and that's why. But I'm not going to argue with you over it. If you didn't love it, perfectly fine by me. It didn't get you the right way. Fine. But I absolutely love it. I'm going to continue to love it. I'm just going to be living here in my love and thunder world and be just fine without you.
I wish that it wasn't. It just feels so tribalistic. Is basically my frustration.
I agree.
I just want to live in a world where, like, you and I converse about this stuff all the time. We don't always see. We actually see eye to eye most of the time. But when we don't, we never come to blows. We talk about it and we move on. Like we have a text message thread with our friend Jeff.
Yep.
And we're always kind of talking and like bullshitting in it and giving our opinions on stuff. And when Dominion came out, I was the only one of the three of us who liked it.
Right.
And not a single, I think people misunderstand when I tweet that I like these movies or whatnot. I think people think I always love them. in our thread when we were talking about it, I was nowhere near like Dominion's a good movie. I never said that. In fact, I was like, I don't think it's a very good movie, but I think that there's a lot of really big ideas that I like in it, and that's why the movie worked for me, because it felt like it was something Michael Crichton would have written.
Yeah, I agree, and I can see that. I can see some of your arguments. You always are very passionate about your arguments. It always makes me look at things another way, which I love about you. Like, I actually look at things another way, and I mean, I don't always come around and agree, but I
totally fair. No, right.
I think we both are. I think we're both that way to a degree in terms of we both are just very positive people in general when it comes to film. We love films. We want film to be good. So we tend to look for the good in film. My brother and I go to movies a lot more recently. He's very much he's hard to please. He's a very hard to please film guy. And he always makes fun of me. He jokes around. He's like, you tolerate a lot. You are still good at looking at the ambition of a film and not, well, I only look at like the results of the film. And I'm like, yeah. And you know what? I'm happier for it though. And that's fine if you don't. I'm not saying you have to be like us. I'm not saying you have to be that positive.
But you should be.
But at the same time, I'm getting a lot more joy out of it than you are, aren't I?
Right. Well, and you know what's so funny in that too? And you know why I think we are the way that we are, other than we're just like positive human beings? Mm-hmm. You know where it comes from? We like horror movies.
That's
you know what that means? We like horror movies, and horror movie fans, we're very tolerant, passionate, and very, very tolerant of not very good movies. Right. Because, you know, as much shit as I like to give Ben Bateman on his takes about like horror franchises and stuff, he's partially also not wrong. Like a lot of horror sequels are not very good,
trashy.
Yeah, but like ultimately, like that's kind of the point. Like Paramount churned out 8 Friday the 13th movies in the span of like 9 years, guys.
Right? Wow, imagine that.
Like think about that. Like they were churning out movie after movie after movie. And more of those are probably bad than good. I mean, we are eventually going to get to Friday the 13th on a podcast. Like,
absolutely.
But it's funny because I was thinking about this the other day. I took my parents to go see. They wanted to go see Wizard of Oz last week. It was playing on the big screen.
Oh, cool.
So I took them to go see Wizard of Oz, and we went and had dinner beforehand. And so we were at dinner, and somehow we ended up on the Friday the 13th thing, and we were talking about the movie and the franchise as a whole, and I got to the point where I started explaining each of the sequels.
Oh boy.
And I felt my dad had like this glossed over look like, what the fuck did I raise? But my mom is like inherently kind of listening, and I got to Friday Part 7, and I went, this is where it becomes Jason versus Carrie. And like immediately I heard myself say it out loud, and I was like, this sounds so dumb, but that's like entirely what this movie is.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's Jason versus Carrie. And I realized in that moment, I was like, yeah, we really are more tolerant than most people when it comes to literally anything that happens with horror movies, because we put Jason versus a psychic girl who is basically Carrie, and we were cool.
We actually took the idea where like people say franchises go to die. They have no idea what to do next. So they're just going to go, let's put them in space. They actually legitimately did that in Jason X, and we lapped it up.
Goddamn right we did. Are you kidding
me? Because it was fucking awesome.
That movie has some of the best kills in the franchise too. 100%. I'm not going to lie. It's so much fun. And I that's my point. Like, dude, I've sat through how many bad Leprechaun movies, and yet I love every single one of them. Like, you know why? Because Warwick Davis rules. I fucking love Warwick Davis.
Me too. Same
the
thing.
Leprechaun movies are not good.
They're very
but
trashy.
I enjoy the but I enjoy the shit out of them.
Even the first one, like a lot of time you can go, Halloween franchise isn't that good, but Halloween 1 is legitimately considered one of the greatest horror films of all time. Leprechaun,
maybe one of the greatest movies of all time.
Right? Leprechaun doesn't even have that, and yet here we are. And yet here we are still watching all of them. Period.
I think only one of the Leprechaun sequels went to theaters. After that, it was direct to video for like the rest of its franchise's existence.
Makes sense. It actually makes sense.
Tremors, I think similarly, Tremors 2 was the only one that had a limited theatrical release, and then everything else was direct to video after that. And Tremors is one of my favorite franchises. Like, again, we are very tolerant of kind of trashy, bad ideas being turned into movies. And I think that is what makes us special, PLD, which is why we can do movie podcasts all about the Halloween franchise like we are right now, because we enjoy cinema. We just enjoy movies. And I don't care what anyone says. Bad horror movies are also cinema.
Everything is cinema. If it's a movie, it's a movie. It's a movie. I don't care what you make it. It could be a bad movie. It could be a bad TV movie. It could be a bad Netflix movie. It could be a bad whatever kind of movie. It could be a bad home movie. It's still a movie. And if you enjoy it, then fuck everybody else. That's what I have to say.
I mean, look, it's not people can't see it, obviously, but you're aware, and I know people have seen pictures. It's clear I love movies. I buy movies. I have a gigantic physical media collection because I love movies. Like, I got 5 shelves in my office behind me and next to me that are all just full of all sorts of movies. Like, that's who we are. Mm-hmm. And I think that's why people keep coming back. And every time you and I start talking about things, people are always like, you guys are so passionate and it's so exciting. It happened last night because somehow last night during the show on Jess's stream, or last night for us a few days ago for the people listening, I really can't implore you guys enough. Number one, if you didn't watch the Sip and Tell show on Kiwi Jess's channel, go check it out. It was super fun. It was like fun. Somehow we ended up on the pilot episode. She thought it was a good idea to have the two of us together, and it ended up being 3.5 hours. Choices were
shocking. Shocking,
yeah.
I think.
But she had to go leave to make some phone calls or something. It left us in charge. And so we were letting the chat ask us stuff. And so they started being like, PJ, go to X shelf, go like X rows down and X movies in and pull off the movie and let's have you review it. And we ended up with Dr. Sleep. And I just like,
if you don't know PJ, that's going to be a long conversation. There is no brief review on Dr. Sleep for PJ.
There's
or for
not.
me, for that matter, to be honest with you.
And someone in the chat was like, Passionate PJ is my favorite PJ. And I was like, thank you. I appreciate that. But it's because we care, and it's really fun. And so I know this is kind of a wild and wildering preamble to everything we're going to be talking about, which is also why I think this conversation about Halloween 2 is going to be super fascinating, because I'm not going to be completely positive about it, because it's not out of an area of like spite so much as it's a weird turn that I had watching this movie in particular this time because of where we have come in the time since. And I think that's a very interesting conversation. And I think that this will wrap around again when we get to 2018 and Kills in particular.
Yeah.
Because 2018 and Kills, for all intents and purposes, tread a ton of the same information in a ton of the same time frame as this movie is doing. Mm-hmm. Yeah, but doing it better.
Yeah. I was saying, too, like, we're all very positive people. We talk about that all the time. We spent the last, 15, 20 minutes talking about how positive we are. Doesn't mean we don't love it. It doesn't mean we love every movie. There's a lot, especially you're going to listen to some of the stuff that there's a lot we don't like about Halloween 2. Right? We'll tell you about it. At the same time, we approach it differently, I think, than many people do today. It's not a case of black or white, all or nothing. It's a case of we laugh at it a little bit. We get some of the bad stuff. We joke about it. But at the end of the day, it doesn't ruin our day. It doesn't ruin our day. It seems like ruin people's day. People that get they get butthurt and they don't understand. Like, they can't move on with their lives. Like, to me, I only talk about this movie when I'm doing a podcast about it, or I'm talking about the Halloween franchise in general. Somebody asks me about it. I'm not going to go start if I saw somebody 3 weeks from now go, Halloween 2 is my favorite movie of the Halloween franchise. I was like, you go, boy.
Great.
You go, girl.
Yeah.
Have a good time.
Fucking great. Like, it's very, you and I give each other shit over our opinions. Don't get me wrong. But absolutely. I'm never going to go out of my way to shit on someone other than maybe the Cinefanatics and their ranking lists.
Yeah, but that's them. They asked for
them.
It.
They did. I mean,
many times they've asked for it, actually.
Yeah. So it's just kind of funny because, ultimately at the end of the day, what good is focusing on stuff that doesn't please you or doesn't make you happy and being negative all the time when you can focus on the stuff that makes you feel good and your passion can infect others. And I think that it's about what you put back into the world. Right. That's what you get back. So 100%. Positivity and passion should be the thing you're putting out, not negativity and scorched earth shit. You could get me going about the How I Met Your Mother finale and things like that. You and I have talked about that in the past, but it's not a thing that I like to focus on. You know why? Because it's fucking miserable not liking a thing. Yeah. It really is.
It really is. And I also because I've been in this position entirely. I'm someone who I'll get castrate for saying it now, I guess probably. I enjoyed How I Met Your Mother all the way to the end, and we've had this conversation.
You did.
But at the same time, I hate feeling I try not to. I feel guilty sometimes for liking because everybody will come down on me on it. And it's like, you know what? Why are you retroactively ruining it for me? And not you.
No, I know you and I have we converse and give each other shit.
That's a different type of thing. But so I don't want to go to somebody else. If somebody says Halloween 2 is my favorite film, Halloween Resurrection is my favorite film, I don't want to shit on that for them. Let them like it. Let them have a good time with it. Fuck it. More for me. I don't want to shit on somebody else's joy.
Sabrina's a great example of that. Our friend Sabrina, she loves Halloween Resurrection. I would never give her a hard time for liking that movie. We're going to have a whole conversation about that movie in the future. And I have a lot of feelings about it, but I'm not going to be hard on you. There's no fucking reason to be. Which is actually, I want to segue into this real fast before we get into Halloween 2. We didn't talk about this, but last week, because we recorded early, we finally got a trailer for Clerks 3.
Yes.
Talk about a movie that is I'm so excited for, but seems so earnest and passionate and being made by people who genuinely just love the thing that they love. And that is hanging out together, making these movies about life with these characters that we've come to know since 95. What a special fucking trailer, dude.
It really just made me happy. It made me happy until I got some of the comments. That's the thing that pissed me off. Some people don't like the trailer. And I'm like, then fine. Don't like the trailer, but you don't have to shit on it for me. I liked it. I enjoyed it.
I'm going to say it sucks because the internet has done to Kevin Smith what they're currently doing to Taika. Yeah. They fully turned on Kevin a long time ago. And the truth is that these people have been out for Kevin since Red State.
Before that, some people to Clerks 2 even.
Well, Red State was that turning point because remember he did that thing where they were at Sundance and he was like, someone can bid on the movie, but then he walked out on stage and it was, I'm buying the rights to my own movie and distributing it my own way. And he took the power back from everyone because he was making a point. And I kind of dug that because he was going back to the indie vibe. He was like, look, I'm going to do things my way, the way that I want to do it. And he's been touring his movies ever since Red State. And it's fucking cool. I actually really love it.
I really am proud, and I get proud of the right word. I guess it's such a unique thing to do. He doing what he wants to do. He has nobody else to say. I mean, some people go, well, he should have he should have people that aren't yes men around him. He should have people who are going to say no to him. Sometimes people need studio. And fuck you. He's a filmmaker who wants to make what he wants to make, and he's getting to do that. He's living the dream that most filmmakers would love to have. He has
a specific audience, right?
Right. And if he wants to make a fucking yoga hoser movie with a pop fever dream, he is having fun. Yeah. There's people who like the movie. So what if you don't like it? Don't watch it. If you're over Kevin Smith, don't watch the trailers. Don't go through the thing. Don't bother. You know where you are. People who I really feel like the people who watched this trailer and shit on it were people who knew exactly what it was going to be. They knew they were going to hate it already.
Yeah.
And they went to watch it just to watch it. And then just to spew on it. And I should never get that. If I'm not interested in a film, I pretty much will avoid a trailer. I might go, all right, I'll pop. Black Adam, something I've not been interested in forever. I didn't watch the trailer when it came out. I watched the trailer when it was in the theaters. When I finally was there, it came out in the theater. I saw it. I was like, whatever. But
you know what's bad about that?
What was that?
I totally forgot I had seen that trailer. Until I was sitting in the theater again and it started playing and I went, oh, right, this movie is coming out. And I watched this trailer a week and a half ago.
Right. Yeah,
and I had totally forgotten that I had seen it.
Oh, yeah.
But the audience is eating it up every time I see it now in front of a movie.
Yeah.
But I could not care less.
Right.
Because it feels like this movie has been in development for so long that I just am over it.
Yeah, I agree. But if you are someone who wants to watch Black Adam, excited about The Rock in that movie, great. I'm happy for you. Go nuts.
I just find it so funny, though, because I'm looking at the Kevin Smith of it all, and it's like he is totally doing what every filmmaker wants to do. He has a very specific audience who he's just making the movies for himself and the audience that are going to show up. He's doing it on his own. They show up, and it covers the cost of making the movie. Isn't that what matters? Ultimately, at the end of the day, that should be the thing that matters the most. He's happy. And I really think we should be supporting that.
And what's more heartfelt than like a guy who who has a heart attack, almost dies, and decides he wants to turn that into a movie? Has something personal. That's something personal to say to me. And if you're going to shit on somebody for something personal to say, then fuck you. Fuck you.
Also, like, Reboot was surprised. Like, his movies have been really introspective since it happened, which was the beautiful thing about Reboot also. Mm-hmm. And, like, if it wasn't for Reboot, who knows if his, like, personal relationship with Affleck would have ever been fixed.
Yeah.
Like, that kind of stuff matters, man.
Yeah, 100%.
It really does.
That's one of the most heartwarming stories of the entire movie, of that decade, the entire decade, as far as movie relationships go. That was really heartwarming, and I love hearing that story. I've heard that story many times when I saw Reboot when it was on tour. I got to hear Kevin tell that story in person.
Yeah.
There's something magical about it. And that scene, like, paid off in dividends because that's my favorite scene in the movie.
And the fact that he wrote that scene not knowing, you know, ultimately what was going to happen, and he got him back, and Ben does it so effortlessly and so beautifully. Reboot makes me cry now every time I watch it because I think it's so heartfelt, and it's so, like, I think people are so goddamn cynical, man, that they don't see the beauty,
the reality,
and, like, the reality to why it should matter. And I think that ultimately, the fact that Kevin has done movies like Tusk, like, say what you will about the movie, but he took a weird thing that he found on the internet that he podcasted about and turned it into a 2-hour horror film like no one else could have made other than Kevin Smith.
Right. 100%, man.
You don't have to like it, and that's fine. But he made it.
And it's kind of cool. So doing more than you're doing. People out there probably who can sit on Twitter and just like shit on it.
I thought you were talking about me, and I was like, I mean, he is doing more than I'm doing. You and I are sitting on the podcast getting ready to talk about Halloween, two.
Is it time? Have we ranted enough? Have we
I guess. I mean, look, have we ranted enough? No, because it's about to happen a lot with this movie.
That's true.
But
forget everything we just said about being positive, because here we are, Halloween. No, I'm kidding.
1981's Halloween 2, which is the directorial debut of Rick Rosenthal, who, to PLD's point, was handpicked by John Carpenter for a sequel that no one really wanted to make, other than the producers of the film. And that is not more clear than any time in this movie as you're looking at it, because the truth of the matter was this movie comes out 3 years after the end of the last film.
Right.
And it is very clear from every story I've read, every making of documentary I've heard, everything, no one liked this script. No one thought it was going to be very good.
How does that work? How does nobody like a script that still gets made? Well, Bud liked it, I think.
Well, Bud is special. You know what it is? And the truth is that after Halloween came out, people started imitating. And Friday the 13th comes out and blows the door off, and the producers of the Halloween franchise go, look, we need a sequel. We need to do something. Carpenter and Deborah really didn't want to do anything with it. But they said, you know what, fine, we'll write the script. And they kind of just wrote something that they thought was a follow-up that could work in some regard. But the other thing was, now they had to answer to an audience who was getting used to the brutality of things like the Friday movies. So now you're tonally sort of shifting from Halloween to Halloween 2 of what we are expecting out of Michael.
Right.
And I think that inherently is where the problem of this film really lies, is that this movie is not so much a Halloween film as much as it is a Friday the 13th film, down to the fact that it is overstuffed with characters who are just there to be murdered, over to the fact that it really kind of is lacking the feel and the presence of the first one, even though Dean Cundey still shoots the movie and it's set during the same night. Like, it literally picks up within moments of the first one's ending.
Okay, that's a ballsy decision to make. And it's one of those things I go back and forth on. Like, I like the ambition of trying that. But at the same time, it's also very limiting. Because Rick Rosenthal then not only have to continue right on, you also then have to kind of ape Carpenter's style, whether you want to or not. Like, it's hard because you have to tonally match the first film. If you take a film and you do a sequel a couple years later, you're forgiven if it's tonally a little bit different, if it looks a little different, because it's not supposed to match up like a puzzle piece. It's like slices of life. right? Every couple of years, different year there. This is supposed to match up perfectly as to what happened. It goes literally, they basically remake the ending a little bit, twist around a little bit, and give you different perspectives from Michael. And that doesn't really work, but it's supposed to fit like a glove. And that really, I think, limited Rosenthal, who is, I think, quite frankly, I think it's best to say, again, I don't want to be mean. He's kind of a journeyman director, doesn't really have a whole lot of his own style. So maybe that's the reason why you pick him, to try to ape somebody else's style, but he can't. He's not John Carpenter. He can't do a John Carpenter. And the sequences that John Carpenter directed seem pretty much better shot, because they feel like they're John Carpenter, even if he's mailing a little bit himself. Because he doesn't want to do this. No one wants to do this. Carpenter hates this film. He said later on he doesn't even like the film. It's an abomination. And he fully admitted he made this for the paycheck, because it was kind of refreshing to hear the interview. He basically said that because he had some films in place and everything else. He said they were going to make Halloween 2. He was convinced they're going to make Halloween 2 with or without me. He didn't get a lot of money out of Halloween 1, which was one of the most successful independent horror films of all time. So he deserved his cut. So I'll make Halloween 2 for the money I deserve for Halloween 1 at this point, pretty much. And he had a hard time with the story. He had a hard time with the story. He said it was a lot of beer drinking, a lot of late nights, a lot of writers' block.
And they kind of just wrote it just to do it, him and Deborah Hill together. And the funny thing is like, if you've ever heard or read or watched any interviews about this, Tommy Lee Wallace, who directed Halloween 3, Season of the Witch, which we'll be talking about next week, he was supposed to direct Halloween 2.
Yep.
And he has said that he felt so bad telling his friends no in the end, but he hated the script so much and said he felt like it was such a sellout, and he felt like it was so tonally off from what the first movie was that he wanted nothing to do with it, because he said this was just a ripoff of what Friday was doing. So we were basically the thing that ripped us off. We were now ripping off, but trying to get that audience.
And it was betrayal of everything Halloween had been in many different ways. And it's true. And Carpenter himself will tell you that as well. So we get, what else? Also, the other thing we should mention before we go into the actual plot and go from there, the character wise, is there were a lot of chefs in this kitchen. You had you had obviously the director of Rosenthal, you had Carpenter, you had Hill, all were heavily involved. You had the original producer from Compass there, Erwin Yablans, who was so intent doing this and ended up getting into a screwy position with Carpenter and with Robert Rem, because there was some kind of weird. There was a story where he went on a plane. He was saying, we're going to do The Fog and Halloween 2 with Carpenter. And also, next thing he knows, Robert Rem snakes Carpenter's The Fog underneath him. And there's this big tete-a-tete where the producer felt pissed off at Carpenter and got him to agree, fine, you can do The Fog, but we're going to get Carpenter to definitively write Halloween 2. And that was part of it. But then after all that's said and done, Yablans ended up selling the rights to Dino De Laurentiis from Italy. And it's like, well, okay, so but somehow Yablans still kind of stays on board for part of it. So we got Rosenthal, we got Carpenter and Hill, we got Yablans for part of it. We have Dino. We have
Dino. Yeah, people forget Dino De Laurentiis is involved in this because he's at Universal at the time, and Universal didn't really have any horror properties, so they were trying to scoop up anything they could to sequelize it so that they could get in the game that Paramount had and that WB and New Line had with their Nightmare stuff. And so they're getting Evil Dead, and they're doing this. They're trying so hard to find and sequelize everything.
Right. And we still have Mustafa Akkad, who is the holy name of producers in Halloween. He's him and his son have been pretty much the guiding forces since the get-go, and still Malak Akkad is in with the recent ones and everything else. So there's just a lot of people who you have to please, and when you try to please that many people and that many people have their say in it, you're going to get a jumbled mess, and that's what we got, pretty much.
Mm-hmm. And so it's really fascinating going into this because, again, it just seems like other than Rick, no one really wants to be involved. I mean, this movie gets edited by 2 different people, too, just to try to make the movie work. Rick had no idea, and we'll get into it as we get towards the end, but he didn't even know the ending of his own movie because there was cuts that were made that he had no idea about, that he didn't see until he saw the film. Mm-hmm. That's kind of what we're dealing with here. And, Dick Warlock, who is the stunt coordinator of the film, but he also plays Michael Myers in the film.
Yep.
He took over the role for Nick Castle. He's even said that, like, Deborah Hill in the past, before she had passed away, she would talk about how she never thought that Dick really got, like, the movements and the walk and the feel of the shape correct. But they were so not invested in the film that I guess she never said anything to him while they were on set.
Neither did Rick.
And he was like, yeah. And he was like, no one ever said anything to me.
They assumed they liked it. He assumed that they liked it, which I get. And that means at that point, it just kind of shows just how disinterested.
Yeah. And this movie made a lot less money than the first one, too. Like, it's kind of shocking how little it made comparatively, in a way.
Still very successful, though. I'm thinking about it. $2.5 million budget, gets about $25.5 million in North America.
Not saying it wasn't successful, but, comparative to the first one, which had made like close to $70 million when all was said and done.
For 300,000 or 350,000, whatever it was.
it's a pretty steep contrast. And again, I also think that's the 3-year wait of it all.
Yeah.
Great. That plays a big part in it. So we'll kind of jump into it. The truth of the matter is that the movie, as we said, it picks up literally moments after the first one ends.
Yep.
And Donald Pleasance runs downstairs. It's still Halloween, 1978. We see a little recap of the first film, obviously, because back in this time, the thought process was, well, we don't have VHS just yet, so we have to put a little bit of a recap in. Of course, at this time, they were also running these films. If they were sequelized, they were ending up on like television, and there was a TV edit of Halloween that came out, which had scenes that were shot specifically for the TV edit that tied even more closely to Halloween 2, which is such a weird choice ultimately, because
you'd never see that today. It's so strange to think about.
No, you wouldn't. Like, Coppola did his version of doing something like that with The Godfather 1 and 2 when he needed funding for Apocalypse Now, but he didn't shoot more scenes. He just took a bunch of the deleted material, put it back into the movies, and released it chronologically. Which is still my preferred way to watch The Godfather at this point, is that 7-hour chronological version, which I think is great. But I digress. So we start with a kind of a recap of the first film, because that's how they're getting the audience back. It's been 3 years. They know that most of them have probably not revisited it in some time. Right. And again, Halloween was a big deal. They knew people had seen it, but that was the first like big horror film in a long time that was like in the middle of a slasher film, rather, that was, released on an audience in the middle of suburbia. And so they're kind of doing this thing. Then Loomis goes outside and, apparently Michael's wandered away, as we know. And Loomis goes out. And my favorite is this dude down the street comes walking out of his house. He goes, "What is this? Some kind of joke? I've already had enough trick-or-treaters messing with me tonight," or whatever. And Loomis goes, "You know nothing about death."
That's what it is. I've been trick or treated to death tonight. That's what he said. It's like, you don't know what death is, which is actually a line from the novelization of Halloween, I believe, or something like that. It was like they took some lines from the first one or whatever. Like, that's a great line.
And it's so funny because again, we don't usually text while we're watching the movies. But the first thing I said as I had started the movie and I got to that part, I went, "Donald Pleasance, just the best." I quoted the line and I put 11 out of 10 would recommend. Like, straight up, that's how I saw it, because the truth of the matter is that I don't care how you look at this film, Donald Pleasance is the absolute MVP coming back as Dr. Samuel Loomis.
He really is the only reason to really watch this movie. He is unhinged in the best way possible. Like, he's actually, even though like it's still the same night, you could see his himself unraveling and get more and more extreme and more crazy himself. But it makes sense when you watch the character. And it's funny. It's actually he actually has a point from point 1 to Halloween 6 where you see him get more and more crazy like each film. But it feels right. It feels what he should be doing. He takes this role. He choose all the scenery. I mean, it's what he was hired for in the first one, to be honest with you, as the only kind of known actor, so to speak, at that point. He was supposed to be this presence, and that's what he is. He's a presence as much as the shape is. It comes down to, I know that Halloween is basically the shape in Laurie's throat, as people say. Laurie, the first final call girl. I'm not trying to dismiss Laurie in any way. I love Laurie in the first film. I love Laurie in H2O. I love even having this Laurie stuff in the recent ones with Halloween 2018 and Halloween Kills. But to me, and maybe it's because I grew up with the 80s sequels, to me, it was always the shape and Dr. Loomis. That's what made it tick for me.
That's the thing I like the most, man, is the truth is, now, don't get me wrong, I've really liked what they've done over the last couple of films with Laurie.
Yeah.
But I think that the Loomis and Michael relationship is always the more fascinating one.
Mm-hmm.
And that's because I think ultimately we don't have the familial connection.
Right.
And I think that the funny thing is that they've actually done the right thing in a way with Laurie in the new ones. And that's kind of what Loomis is in these ones. She's taken on that role where she only sees the pure evil behind the eyes.
Right.
And so her obsession is destroying Michael.
Correct.
And it's the same thing that corrupted Loomis ultimately, was that his sole reason for being was making sure that Michael never hurt anyone ever again.
Yep.
And I think that is what made these earliest films so fun and so good. Not that I don't like Jamie Lee as Laurie. Don't get me wrong. I do. But it's pleasance.
Agreed.
And that is the heart of these films for me, and the relationship between the two of them, because you can tell Michael and him are going – it kind of becomes the end of The Dark Knight, right? Once Batman strings up the Joker at the end of the movie and the Joker says, we're going to be destined to do this dance forever, and he just kind of leaves him there to hang.
Yep.
He doesn't kill the Joker. He leaves him.
Right.
That's kind of what this relationship feels like to me in the confines of the horror space, is that Loomis and Michael were destined to do this dance forever.
Right. Absolutely. And it's the one thing about this film to me is that it really solidifies that even more so. I mean, obviously Jamie Lee doesn't come back for anything else until H2O. So 4, 5, and 6 are really, really and truly the Donald Pleasance, the Sam Loomis versus the Shape ideal, not counting 3 for obvious reasons we'll get to. But this film is the one that solidifies that, because amazingly enough, I still can't understand this. You got Jamie Lee Curtis, who's a hot young actress at this point. I mean, hot, not like physically, but as in like she's a rising star. A rising star. She's a scream queen. Not self-proclaimed. She's legitimately a scream queen with all these movies in the genre, to the point where she actually physically says, or she came out and said, "This is my last film. Halloween was my last film in that genre for a while." She wanted to break free and do some more stuff because she was so good at it.
She was doing Terror Train, Prom Night.
Yeah, all of those things. So she wanted a break. So here we have Jamie Lee Curtis, and the last time she's going to be in the Scream Queen role, reprising the role that was the first real, legitimately crowned Scream Queen, and they do nothing with her. Like she's barely in the film. She's been barely in the film.
She really is. She also did Road Games. Like literally, Halloween's her debut. Then she does The Fog, Prom Night, Terror Train. Does an uncredited computer voice in Escape from New York. Does Road Games, Halloween 2, and then does an uncredited telephone operator voice in Halloween 3. So her track record is almost exclusively horror from 1978 to 1982.
Yeah. That's exactly what it is. And yet they choose to do nothing with her. Nothing. She's barely in the film. When she is, it's ridiculous. And even though it ends on her, it still doesn't feel anywhere does it ever feel like her film, or does she doing anything with it. And it's not her fault. It's the writing of it. It's the choice to like focus more on Loomis, which I shouldn't decry, because like I said, the Loomis Michael thing is important, and Laurie is kind of stuck in the hospital, but it just surprises me that there's so little done with her comparatively.
To be honest, it's kind of funny, because I think one of the things we'll talk about as we get into the future movies is that basically Halloween Kills does the same thing with her.
Yeah.
But Halloween Kills does it in a much more important way.
Correct.
That actually gives her character drive and importance, whereas Halloween 2 kind of makes her feel like an afterthought. And that's how I felt with her character almost this entire movie.
That's funny because some people will argue one of the reasons they didn't like Halloween Kills was exactly that reason. But to me, it never made much sense because she has her moments in Halloween Kills. And not only that, there's the promise of a third film coming, which is going to be more about her anyway. So sidelining her a little bit for one of the part of the film, the middle part of the film, seems okay because it's not the end all be all. Sorry, this is Jamie Lee's last stab if you were at Halloween until she's convinced to come back for H2O. So in that case, it doesn't make any sense at all.
No, and I'll be honest with you. As much as I like her, she doesn't seem like she really wants to be here. As much as literally everyone else doesn't either.
Yeah.
It's her performance is fine, but it feels
a little
constrained lax. And a little lax. But I also think that's the writing. I'm not going to put it all on her, but it's not as interesting as it should be. It's really just not. And the other thing about this movie, ultimately, that I found myself thinking as we were watching it is I could not care less about any of the side characters in this movie.
No. Don't want to care about his
just, yeah.
About it. There is kind of, but only by default.
There's no real rhyme or reason to any of the characters. There's no Annie. There's no characters I care about. Like, we have no Tommy. We have no Lindsay. Like, there's none of these characters that I'm latching onto in the same way. I mean, they have Lee Brackett back only to shuffle him out just as quickly.
I was going to wait until we got there in the movie because it's coming up. But I'll say
to
it
be
right
honest,
anyway.
I don't know if there's a lot for us to cover with this as we just kind of go into how we feel. So.
That was one of the worst decisions they could have made, and it made absolutely no sense unless there was some issue between Lee Brackett and Rick Rosenthal that we don't know about, and not from what I can tell. Why on earth would they do this? I get storyline-wise to a degree, but they find out that Lee finds out that Annie was killed earlier in the night.
That night.
They find out, they go to they are met with this other Hunt guy who's like kind of like Brackett's number one guy who we never see in Halloween.
Hunter Von Leer.
Right. And he sees Annie's body, gets visibly upset, absolutely. Not quite as good as Brad Dourif does in the zombie movies. But he gets upset, starts having this spiel in front of all the news reporters, which is just god awfully just not supposed to happen. And then goes, I got to go tell my wife before somebody else does. Okay, fine. But that's how you write him out of the movie. The guy who was driving around with Pleasance the whole time last time, pretty much. He's in it for 3 minutes. He is and he's such a great actor for Carpenter generally. And he's not a Dudley starring guy, but he's always a guy from every Carpenter movie I've seen, everything else. He always delivers a solid performance. And you gave the guy motivation. Michael Myers kills Annie. He is the most motivated person besides Dr. Loomis at that point to go get the son of a bitch. Nah, I gotta go. I'm gonna let you.
I need to go tell my wife because I don't want her to find out from the media.
And then, so I'm gonna give it to this Hunt guy who, no offense meant to the actor, but he's no Lee Brackett.
What did I say to you? He felt like a guy who was a jock in high school who was the quarterback who peaked there.
He's Trip McNeely. He's the Trip McNeely of the Halloween franchise. Trip McNeely.
It's such a weird thing too, because the other thing about this movie, and I should have brought this up actually, because we kind of jumped ahead. One of the weird things is that there's a lot of stuff where they're trying to just emulate what they did in the first.
Right.
And so that includes the opening of the film once we're through the recap and we've done the whole opening credits, which they tried to go for a more gothic feel for the opening theme, by the way, and something about it feels off. Immediately I'm already not totally into the movie, as weird as that sounds, but the theme is just kind of very oddly not fun comparative to the first one. But we start with it because the tracking shots in Halloween and these shots of the POV of Michael have become kind of hugely commonplace for the franchise. But the thing that I think hurt this one the most for me is that I missed when it felt like I was looking through the mask. It was something I thought Dean Cundey had done so well with the first one, which has always stood out, is the fact that it looks like you're looking through the eyes of the killer. This time, it just feels like a camera. because there's nothing kind of hanging on the front, And so we're watching Michael the same night as he's like wandering the streets, which again, when we get to Halloween Kills, retreads some of these plot points in its own way, but does it much better. And
100%.
We see Michael walking down the street and he sees Loomis, and Loomis is going, I shot him 6 times. I shot him 6 times in the heart, and he got up and walked away. And, Brackett's like, please stop. I heard you the first time you shot him. But I'm loving Pleasance just he's screaming at Brackett about how he just shot him, and he walked away. But Michael's just kind of wandering, and he goes into someone's house and steals a knife. And
all right. I got to interject right there.
Yeah,
this is one of those scenes that they added. The studio added, and John Carpenter actually did this scene, and it's not a good choice. But it wasn't like Carpenter's fault. The only reason they decided that the studio said there's not enough kills. It's like it takes way too long to get Michael Myers' first kill. So we want to add an action scene, a kill in the beginning of the film. So Carpenter kind of went, all right, I'll do a really quick scene. They filmed it. It's awful. It makes no sense. I mean, I know Michael's evil. I know Michael just kills, but there's no reason for him to kind of walk in his door, plan this whole thing out.
But also he leaves the older people first,
right?
Like where he gets the knife, he leaves them alone, but then kills the girl next door.
It's like there's no rhyme or reason of it at this point.
Now there is the argument to be made. Devil's advocate is that the argument is he's clearly basically only been killing teenagers to this point, as far as we're aware, because they all remind him of Laurie. Because in this, of course, is the big reveal is that he is related to Laurie and that they're brother and sister. And
we're going to go into that later.
Yeah, we'll get into that. But so the argument is that he saw another teenager, it reminded him of Laurie, and he killed her for that reason. But it just feels very senseless in a way that the other kills don't in the first movie. And I don't mean that in any regard to like the things he's doing in the first one. He's been hunting these people. He's been stalking them the entire movie, right?
100%.
In this one, it's random. We don't know who this person is. And now, is it supposed to create an air of unease? Yes, probably. But I'm not that interested in the unease because the truth of the matter is I don't care about this person in the same way that I cared about the others. And I'm not saying I have to care about every victim when I watch these movies. Again, I'm a huge Friday the 13th fan. I would argue that the point of those movies is to not care about the teenagers.
Yeah, exactly. But this one, it does not feel that way. It feels like it's supposed to be something more, but it's not.
But Halloween has never been that. And again, I can't say this enough, and it's hard to because the truth is we've had other sequels since then, but the Halloween films have always gone out of their way to give these characters some sort of depth before they're killed. I'm not going to say that they're all like great Academy Award winning type character arcs or anything, but I would say generally speaking, rather, I care about the characters enough that either I want to see them die because I don't like the character, or I like the character and I'm rooting for them to survive.
Right.
This kill feels weirdly senseless. And I think that, and sorry, I'm totally stepping on you as I'm going through it because I'm kind of working through my thoughts because I didn't actually talk to you about this in my text chain.
Nope.
All I said is that I didn't like the kill because I thought it looked cheesy because it does. But my bigger problem also is that it just feels senseless in the confines of the rest of the Halloween sphere.
Right.
And that's a weird thing to hone in on. But it's true because, again, it was a forced reshoot by a studio who said, there's not enough blood and not enough kills early on. We need you to fix this. And so it just doesn't feel like the kind of thing that you should be doing.
Right. There's no reason to just put a kill in because like either if you're going to write, if you want something to happen in action beat earlier on in the film, I get that because one of the problems that the studio and almost everybody who read the original draft that Rosenthal was working with in the original cut said that it was very much a slow burn. Very much and too much of a slow burn for the kind of film you're trying to make. I mean, Halloween wasn't exactly a throw right a minute, but it seemed to be like building somewhere, whereas Halloween 2 seemed to be just meandering. And so I get wanting to shake things up, but just it seems so lazy. Like, we're just going to throw a kill in there. Here's a girl. She's on the phone. We're going to kill her. Oh, okay, yeah, we can move on now. And it's as pointless as anything ever is in that film. And there's a lot of pointlessness in this film, to be honest with you. That was one of the ones that really right away was just pointless.
Yeah, and again, I do also contend that I think a big part of the problem is that I feel like I'm looking through a camera. Now, I will say this. I think Halloween 2018 did a better version of this type of exact tracking shot. Better.
Right.
And even though it doesn't have the mask over it, something about that one is so extra unnerving comparatively to what we got in this one. Yeah. The other thing about this opening that bothers me a little bit, as weird as it sounds, we see Michael way too early.
Agreed. Oh, God, agreed.
And I know that's a weird thing because we've already seen the character, obviously, but show a little bit of restraint. We don't need to see him right away.
You build him. That's what you do. You build that for his moment. The first time you see Michael on screen should be a big moment in a Halloween movie. I felt like he's just kind of there. And it didn't help that the mask is just terrible in this film. Like, I don't know how differently why. I remember reading stories about it and stuff, and they couldn't do it quite the same. I don't understand, and I'm not saying I could do better, obviously, but I understand how it went from the way it was in the first one to like the way it is in this one, because it's so crappy in this one throughout. Some movies have bad masks, and some of them have good masks, but this is definitely one of the bad masks.
Yeah. Oh, it's awful. It's really, really bad. Now, to pivot on this, what I do like is that after this, we get another scene of Michael kind of walking through Haddonfield. And again, this was another reshoot because they realized they didn't have a reason for Michael to know that Lori is up in the hospital. Yeah. I like this whole scene of him walking down through Haddonfield's downtown area. That's great. And it's unnerving because everyone's looking at him, not realizing he's the killer, and he's just walking past people.
Right.
That's good filmmaking.
Yes, 100%. And that was an addition by John Carpenter, and it makes sense. And I like that addition to it. Before I go further with this, I want to step back a little bit real quick. We actually mentioned it in our text thread last time. Hashtag justice for Ben Tramer.
Oh, my God.
It's a weird sequence. It's just a weird sequence. And there's your death early on. So I'm not sure why Michael had to kill the girl. You get Loomis like acting like a crazed man, like seeing a person dressed in a Michael type mask, which, by the way, was that like the hot Halloween costume at this point? This weird random.
Clearly, everyone was like, "I'm going to wear the totally white
deformed
William Shatner Star Trek mask,
the deformed William Shatner mask, and black coverall because that is the character I am."
I wonder what movie came out that made them feel like that was what they all wanted to wear.
It's a good question. Maybe I would have to check William Shatner's filmography. Maybe there's something in there.
Yeah.
But you have this kid that looks, and Loomis sees him, goes nuts. Brackett's like there trying. This is before Brackett leaves. Brackett's trying to stop him from shooting and everything else. And then what happens is
such a good moment.
It's a great moment. It shows where Loomis is at this point. It shows who Brackett is, who's not somebody who wants to just shoot somebody. Then all of a sudden, the weird part about it is kid starts crossing the street. Michael starts crossing the street, and a cop car runs him down, crashes into an ambulance. And I got to be honest with you, the funny part about this, that sequence right there is one that has always stuck with my mind, even as a kid. I remember seeing Halloween 2 like maybe once when I was younger, way back when. And that was like my only reminiscence of the film was the ambulance blow up and Michael Myers getting stuck in there. Because I think it was on fire. It kind of freaked me out a little bit. Maybe the best part, the funniest part about it is that's when Gary Hunt shows up and has this, oh my God, overacting moment. Lee, Daddy.
Yeah.
It's like really bad. Then what happens? They all go, leaving the poor kid burning with the cop car burning.
Well, but again, they don't, because they're all assuming it's Michael because Brackett keeps going. Is it him? Is it him? Like, how is he going to know? The dude is fucking on fire.
Right. But that's what I'm saying. But not only that, like maybe working in emergency dispatch and stuff, having like some presence with this, you're just going to leave two vehicles burning right in the middle of the street.
Why the look? You know that was a studio note, by the way.
Yeah,
we need to have an explosion and fire. Like, what a weird choice in the middle of a Halloween movie,
right?
To do something like that because the first movie has nothing like that. And this one, 10 minutes in, is like, let's blow up a car.
Jesus Christ.
Like, what a fucking weird choice.
It's a very weird choice. And
but I still like the character build stuff. I like the moment for Loomis. I liked the moment for Lee Brackett until they write Brackett out in the next scene. But like it's a decent character moment in Justice for Ben Tramer, who just dies so quickly.
Mentioned in the first film as a potential love interest, Jamie Lee Curtis's Laurie was interested in him anyway. Thought he was cute, and then he dies in a flaming, fiery mess at the beginning of the second. So we never actually get to see his face. Can't determine if Laurie is right or not. But it is a poor death for Ben. I almost feel like it's funny. I'll say this now. I gotta feel like he's going to be in Halloween Ends. I feel like he's going to be in Halloween Ends. Like it feels like that's like the style they've taken. Like the David Gordon and company, like they seem to like kind of taking these characters that were in the first film, whatever mentioned in the first film, like Lonnie and things like that, and giving them little updates years later to see where they are. And since this obviously is retconned in Halloween 2018's trilogy, I bet we see Ben Tramer in Halloween Ends.
I would not be shocked. And I think what's interesting is I'm kind of just thinking about this now. If Tramer had showed up in the first film, he would have been in the costume of the killer from the first movie, which would have created some sort of tension. So it's almost like they're trying to create extra tension in the fact that Tramer was dressed as the killer.
Maybe.
And so it's like, that's a kind of fun Easter egg, but also it doesn't really have a payoff because he never showed up. Because could you imagine if he had showed up dressed as him?
Right.
In the first movie, Laurie may have attacked him.
Absolutely. Probably would have.
Right. So it's just an interesting thought. Like, I like it as a nod, but it's also kind of just silly in a way after the fact because it really doesn't add anything other than, hey, remember that guy that you remember hearing about? Here he is.
Mm-hmm.
And now he's on fire.
Fire. So anyway, so that's, I need to bring that up. So we move on to that. We move the scene over and Michael gets the idea to walk to the hospital or whatever, because he can't drive. Or we know he can drive, but can he drive? We don't know. He's a good driver. He's a bad driver. We get a ticket. We get pulled over. Who knows? But we get to the hospital, and this is another interesting and cheap set piece from the movie, and the fact that it never really makes it feel like a hospital. I mean, I know it's a small town, and I know understaffing and COVID is something. This place is fucking understaffed, if anything else. There's like 3 people running the whole hospital. There's more babies in the nursery ward than there are employees at this hospital at this point.
That is not wrong.
The funny part about to me also, though, is a movie that totally shows its time. It's totally of its time. They bring Laurie in, and like in the nurse, like, where's Dr. So-and-so? Oh, he was at the country club. I think he's drunk. And then you see the doctor going, all right, nurses, give me some coffee. It's like that would never fly in any way, shape, or form in today's film. But 1981, I don't think anybody ever even said anything about it. They're like, all right, yeah, cool. Doc's just got to get sobered up a little bit. That would be the time. That's what they would do at the time.
It's such a weird little moment, but I kind of love it.
I do,
but it's also just kind of dumb.
I love it because of the time.
Yeah.
I love it because it's of the time, and I'm like, okay, I get it. It's of the time.
So this is where we start to be introduced to Jimmy. God, fucking Jimmy.
Last Starfighter.
Look, I know his intentions must be they're supposed to be good, but I'm going to be honest. Jimmy just kind of comes off as creepy as like a dude who is like almost really just stalking Laurie in the same way that, the Shape was.
Yeah.
But it's just kind of a weird choice. And I don't really love the character, but he starts to kind of fall for Laurie and he cares about Laurie. And then, we've got Jamie Lee Curtis, who's basically catatonic through this whole thing. My favorite, though, is the doctor looking at Laurie. Oh, hey, Laurie, what are you doing here? Did you get stabbed? Like, Laurie almost died, and everyone's just like, hey, how you doing? Like, it's totally cool. Jimmy's actually the only one who actually seems to be taking it kind of seriously in the moment.
Right. And that's only because he wants to get our pants, basically, it seems like at this point. But who knows? But he makes me laugh the entire time. He's such a bumbling character, too. It's hard to, you can't really ever get behind him because, he has the one semi-heroic moment. And I mean that very lightly. It's semi-heroic. When he discovers there's nobody else around, he sends the one nurse off one way. He's like, I'm going to check this, and we'll come out together, and we'll go out to find a radio and get help if we need to. And he follows it up by slipping in a pool of blood and knocking himself out. He's a bumbling idiot the whole time.
Yes, he is.
And he's supposed to be our hero to a degree. Because if Laurie is all laid out and like drugged up half the time, and Sam Loomis is like not in the hospital, this is the guy we're supposed to believe is going to keep Laurie alive or save us. And he just does not fit any kind of bill at all.
No, it's not a good character. And here's the thing at this point with this movie, to be honest, is that from here on, this movie's only 92 minutes and it feels like it's 2 hours. It just meanders. And we get a lot of stuff in the hospital that's just not that interesting with a bunch of characters I just don't care about. And I know that sounds harsh, but it's just kind of true.
Yeah. It is.
I find from here on, I'm mostly only interested in the things that are happening with Loomis. And
Same.
The stuff in the hospital just does not matter to me. Now, we're introduced to one of the worst characters in the entire franchise.
Amazing.
I fucking hate you. Leo Rossi.
Spit on my face.
As Bud. Bud, who is a just despicably bad, awful, bad character. And I don't blame Leo Rossi. He seems like a nice enough dude. Although he did say that he prefers this movie to the first, which is probably just because he's in it.
It's gotta be. He did say he was biased. He did say he admitted he was biased, but
boy, fucking howdy, do I hate this character and do I not want him to die as soon as possible?
He does want. We want him to die pretty much right away. And it's not like he does last long, but he is. He wasn't even supposed to be in the movie. They wanted initially. He was like cast because he was a friend of Rick Rosenthal's, or the same acting class as Rick Rosenthal. And they initially, Deborah Hill was initially very hesitant to cast him because he said he's too New York for a small town, for Haddonfield, for Illinois, like that. And it's true, but Rosenthal chipped away at the point where they eventually gave in. And we get this like slick wannabe ladies man. At least he called himself the good thing about the documentary, he did call himself a wannabe ladies man. He wasn't actually a ladies man, but he wanted to be a ladies man. And it's such a trope of the other slashers at that point. You knew this character was going to die because he's a dick. And he takes advantage of girls all the time, you feel like. And I don't understand what this nurse sees in him ever. And he still gets with them. It's very confusing. But it does lead to a place where when he does die, you're cheering Michael on.
I just hate the character. I really do. And this is one of those times, like, I was talking about it earlier. Sometimes in the Halloween franchises, you're always introduced to characters that you just want to see them die. And Bud is a perfect example of that, which makes him perfect, actually. Mm-hmm. I should have a distaste for the character so much that I am just waiting for the moment that he dies. Just waiting for it to happen. And in that regard, works great because I'm just like, please, for the love of God, Michael, find him. Now, here's the other thing about this movie. Because they're so bent on trying to compete with Friday the 13th in a post Friday the 13th world, the kills in this movie no longer feel like they're Michael kills.
Yeah.
In a way, they feel like they're trying to be Jason kills. And so they're a lot more visceral. They're a little bit more using different things. We get a really long sequence with a security guard walking through the hospital to a great kill with a hammer.
Yes.
But the sequence is so drawn out. But that's a lot of these in this movie, actually.
A lot of drawn out things to some cool death sequences. The aforementioned Bud, while his sequence was a normal choking out like through a shadow, we only get to see it through a shadow. We follow it up when he does kill the nurse in the scalding hot tub sequence, which is probably one of the better deaths in the whole film, better death sequences. But it does feel very not Michael, not very Michael-y at all. It feels much more Jason or other contemporary slasher ripoff deaths in a way.
Yeah, and that's kind of this whole movie's sequence at this point, to be honest. Like, I really, really wish that they weren't chasing Friday the 13th. I know that they are doing it because that's what they think everyone wants, because that's what the audience had come to expect. And here's the thing. I would say that Halloween, in a way, has kind of chased trends comparatively.
Yeah.
In other movies.
After the first one, yeah.
After the first one. And horror chases horror a lot of the time. Franchises chase franchises. It's a thing. Like, I understand that.
Right.
And that's totally fine. For some reason in particular with this movie, though, it stands out. Because, again, a part of this problem is that we've had so many sequels since.
Right.
That I can kind of look at it outside of the vacuum.
Mm-hmm.
These other movies, they do and they don't chase, right? 2018 was very smart that it was chasing the reboot trend in a way, but it still feels quintessentially Halloween because it's borrowing so heavily from the other Halloween films around it.
Right.
This movie is not doing that, and for some reason, it just doesn't sit right with me. I can't really explain it better than that. No,
I agree. I get exactly what you're saying. I too struggle with how to word it, but doesn't feel like a Halloween movie. It just doesn't feel right. It doesn't feel very Michael-y. And I want more out of my Michael. I want more out of the death sequences for Michael Myers. They're just, it's a sad case, to be honest with you. I mean, and that's not to say I don't appreciate the kills that are there. They are still kind of cool and inventive, like the nurse getting the IV drip of her blood out. That's kind of a cool thing to see, and it reminds me a little bit.
That was a great moment,
right? I mean, actually, it reminds me a little bit of the Tombstone death from the first Halloween. It kind of that's the playful Michael. I gotta go. I'll go through this to set up something kind of cool to look at, kind of the artistic side of Michael, if you will. But a lot else is just kind of not as cool. It's just not as fun. It seems like it's chasing trends that they don't need to chase.
And that's the thing. And I think I texted you too. By the time the movie was over, I think I said this in our exchange. The weird thing with this movie is that the body count is like triple.
Yeah.
What it is in the first movie.
Right.
Now there's one less dog death in this movie comparatively, or actually two, which is probably better.
Yeah, I agree with that.
But at the same time, it's just so weird that they started filling it with such weirdly empty characters just to kill them.
Yeah.
Once again, misunderstanding that one of the things that I love so much about the first Halloween is that I tend to like the characters in it.
Right.
And I tend to care about them. So now you've put too many in, and I don't really give a shit about any of them.
Right.
And they're just there to be fodder. And that's not really Halloween to me. Again, I would argue that most of the other Halloween films, for better or worse, even if they have more characters, they at least let us spend time with them. 2018 Kills, H2O, 6, 4, they all have characters that I have at least spent time with. So by the time that we get to their murders or what have you, I actually give a shit.
Yep, 100%. I fully agree with that. So we actually have these death sequences here we talked about. One of the biggest sequences we have after that is we go to the outside again. We have Loomis and Hunt, and they're hunting down things. They find that Michael has, at some point in an undetermined time frame, broken into the school. And they go into the school, and it's a very interesting sequence altogether, this whole next couple of sequences with Loomis. They bring up, again, the right of Samhain, because he's written Samhain on the blackboard or whatever. And they get this whole thing, Samhain, Lord of the Dead, and get into the history of it. And it's part of the thing that we were talking about Carpenter being, I don't know, like he's choosing to ignore everything about Halloween and made it good. The best thing about Halloween was that we did not get Michael Myers' backstory beyond the fact that he killed his sister. That's the only thing we know. Everything else is determined Michael's evil, and he doesn't have any motivation. He's just a monster, just pure evil. Introducing the Samhain and the idea, which eventually will turn into a little bit into the Cult of Thorn and now Halloween 6 to a degree.
I literally said that to you out in the text chain. I went,
"Here's a Cult of
wow, I hadn't really thought about it in a way, but they 100% start the Cult of Thorn stuff very early on.
Right, they do, and it technically does. This is where they built it from. and yet it totally weakens the character, although not as much as something
the reveal.
As it changes everything. It starts in the school, although we don't know it, because it also has Michael stabbing a little girl and saying sister. At that point, you can still pass it off as like he's killing Judith still. He's like focusing on that still. But then we get the reappearance, by the way, someone who I was very glad to see was Marion Chambers, the nurse. Same nurse from the first film. And
as always, I would like to say, Nancy Stevens, we love you. You're one of my favorite things about the Halloween franchise. And I really mean that, because she has been in so many of the movies. Because every time she thinks that Marion as a character has been done, and then she's gotten to come back in some capacity, and I've always enjoyed that. Like, I just get excited whenever I see her, because I like the Marion character. And again, it is not lost on me that Marion Chambers as a name is definitely a nod to the fact that Janet Leigh played Marion Crane in Psycho.
And it's the lifeblood of the franchise from Psycho all the way through. And getting her back again, it was like, oh, she's someone from the original. She's a Halloween 78. She's in Halloween 2. She kind of feels like we're bringing it back. It's that nostalgia for good reasons in a way. And you don't need to do much with her. Just have her be there, because she's a wonderful supporting actress, and she does a great job. Like, she's the only one in this film that like kind of stands toe to toe with Loomis and actually feels like she belongs there. Like, she's right there with him, and like it makes sense to have them together. I love that she smokes. She's a nurse that smokes, again, of its time, and everything else. And then we get into the point where we get them in the car, because the weird scenario that takes place, this John Carpenter, who I love John Carpenter, but sometimes his writing is a little bit, shall we say, whatever needs to happen for the story kind of thing. And like the governor orders Sam Loomis to come back. So about like, not blaming the actual Smiths Grove people who botched the job with Michael. You're going to order the guy who actually is maybe having the best chance of catching him. We don't need you to look. We don't need this bad press on us. Let Haddonfield take care of it. You come back.
That's such a weird choice too. Like, I can't get over that. It's really a PR thing more than anything. They're like, look, this is kind of on us. And here we never really knew that it was like a full on rehabilitation thing. That's kind of added here in this movie, that I guess their whole program was trying to rehabilitate people who were dangerous or murderous. Yeah. And it's kind of a weird choice. And then that makes you wonder, why the fuck were you even trying to move him then when Loomis said not to do it?
Right.
Like, if that was the case, why were you guys already doing that? And of course, there is a deleted scene from the first film that we never actually saw in the movie itself, where Loomis is trying to tell them not to do this for that reason. And I kind of wish it was left in, because it actually would play into this better, ultimately.
I mean, I guess you could argue that maybe they gave up and Michael was not going to be able to rehabilitate him, so they didn't want the stain of him being at the place not being rehabilitated, and that's why they wanted him out. Maybe that's the storyline, I guess, if you want to go that way. But it's not really talked about, so you really have to kind of put that a little bit together. Maybe it's a little too much to ask of people. But yeah, it's a weird choice. But it does end up getting you with the Marshal and with Marion Chambers, and that's when we get what we talked about the whole time, the big reveal. And never has a reveal. Go ahead. Never has a reveal been so like series altering, and yet so in a way series limiting and debilitating as this reveal. Of course, the reveal being that some secret file that Michael Myers' doctor doesn't even have access to. Why? Because of plot, I guess. We reveal that Laurie Strode is Michael Myers' younger sister. I love this angle as a kid. I'm not gonna lie. When I first saw the Halloween films,
say the same exact thing you were.
Halloween 4 was it?
Yeah,
it was spot on. So Halloween 4 makes Jamie her niece or whatever, and it becomes, I like the familiar angle. To me, I was like, that makes sense. Michael, for whatever reason, I didn't need to know why, but Michael wanted to kill all his family. Okay, that was enough motivation for me as a kid. Because as a kid, I needed that motivation. I'm like, why is Michael doing? What's going on? Why is he doing this? Not realizing that when I'm an adult and I rewatch these things, I'm like, the fact that I don't know why he's doing it is a better horror story. He's just pure evil. And then he glommed on to Lori because she showed up at the house. That's the reason why. But no, they have to make Lori his sister, and that adds a whole new level of stuff to everything. And they double down on it and triple down on it, and it ends up just being an awful, awful choice.
I just sit here thinking about it a lot, and I'm like, man, as a kid, I liked it because I felt like when I was younger, it made it scarier that somehow the killer would be related to me. Yep. But in hindsight now, the farther we get away from it, the less I like it, which is kind of the overall feeling of a lot of the stuff they're doing that.
Yep.
And I'm just kind of like, it takes away the agency and fear of the first movie.
Right.
Thankfully, it's never hurt my love for the original because I don't revisit it. I revisit the original more than any of the others, but It's such a weird choice because, again, I would argue the whole point of Halloween, and we talked about it a ton last week, is that it was like the first time I felt like you dropped the monster into suburbia, and it was you being stuck with a monster that you had no idea why he was there. You had no idea what he was doing. To give him a rhyme and reason like that actually kind of sucks.
Neuters him, to be honest with you.
Yeah.
The idea of him. And
right.
That's why
you don't need that.
And debilitates the franchise because all the way up until 2018, all the other films, okay, not including Season of the Witch, there's that caveat in there, even though he should know that that's always a caveat because they're not related. They all hinge upon this familial thing. I mean, granted, it's okay because Jamie Lee Curtis isn't around for 4, 5, and 6, but still a family member with Jamie. H2O is predicated upon it being his sister. Otherwise, he's not going to be tracking down Lori in the school away from Haddonfield, so to speak. Zombie leans into it a bit as well. So 2018 is the first time we get the idea that we're not going to use the sister bit at all. And it was so refreshing to have that not in there. I kind of remember that they left it, if I remember correctly, I have to watch 2018 and Kills again, to be obviously soon. I'm going to do it anyway. But I feel like they left it ambiguous at first. Like we kind of went in, we knew it was only a sequel. We knew that it was retconning Halloween 2, but didn't say what it was going to do about the sister thing. But then finally at one point it was definitively said that it was a rumor. It was only a rumor and it was never really a true thing or something like that. I can't remember exactly what went down. But such a good choice by Halloween 2018. And that's why Halloween 2018 is definitely the superior Halloween 2 movie, to be honest with
you. Well, right. And, again, I've been saying it a lot. We are going to revisit a lot of these same conversations once we get to Halloween and Halloween Kills, because Halloween Kills also dabbles in a lot of the same night.
Mm-hmm. A lot of flashbacks of that night.
Right. And so it's just kind of funny that every time Halloween, I think I said it last week, is kind of choose your own adventure. We've rebooted it so many times within the confines of the franchise of ignoring certain things, starting from scratch. Like, Halloween 1, 2, H2O, and Resurrection are like their own timeline.
Right.
So they kind of ignore 4, 5, and 6 in that. But then, like, Halloween, and Kills and Ends are kind of like their own thing. But then there's the zombie. There's so much happening.
Right.
But all of them kind of build off of each other in another way, too.
Yeah.
And I'm kind of wondering if Ends will actually have some sort of cult element into it in the end also.
I like to touch on everything. They're really trying to celebrate the whole franchise. So I wouldn't be surprised.
Yeah. So it's just kind of interesting because I could see it going like Glass in a way, right? Because Glass's whole twist, spoiler alert for the film Glass, the last film in the Unbreakable Split Glass trilogy. East Rail 117, I believe, is the way that they all consider it. There is like a cult behind everything, basically.
Right.
Or a secret society, rather, kind of like the Hellfire Club.
Right.
I could see them trying to do something like that with Ends, but I just think about this in the capacity that I think the best thing that 2018 and Kills did, to your point, is that they decided we're getting rid of that angle because that familial angle is very worn. And I feel like I started to wonder if Halloween was going too far in being like, even though they're not related, they're going to keep doing this dance together. But the more I watch Kills and the more I fall in love with it, the more I go, oh, wait, no, we really are leaning in on this idea that Laurie has just become Loomis. Michael doesn't care that Laurie's in the story.
Well, let me interject here, because that's part of I go even one step further with you on that, because it decries the familiar relationship, but it does it in such a way that when it does reveal that as a rumor, it twists everything around. It twists your whole perspective, because the whole perspective of when you watch this Halloween movie, we're so ingrained to know that Michael's coming after Laurie because he's his sister or whatever. Michael's always come after Laurie. That's what we're ingrained to believe. So much so that it's set up for it to trick the audience in a way to make you believe like Laurie does. Oh, well, Michael's going to come out. He's going to come after Laurie, and that's going to be what happens. That's going to end up leading to the thing. And we find out Michael could give a shit about Laurie. Michael comes back to Haddonfield. He's not going after Laurie. His doctor, the other doctor character that's in 2018, is trying to force that. Everybody is trying to force that issue. We're trying to force this showdown between Michael and Laurie. But it's even more scarier, to be honest, when you realize that Michael's like, I don't give a fuck who the fuck are you, Laurie Strode? I don't care. I'm just doing my thing. I'm going back home. And you go in my home, yeah, I'll kill you because I'm a fucking monster. But the whole trick and the whole thing, it has a big perspective shift when you realize that, no, Michael's not obsessed with Laurie. Laurie is obsessed with Michael.
Right, exactly.
So
we're getting so far ahead talking about movies that we're going to be so far down the line. But I'll say this. Number one, I think the reveal in this movie in particular feels really ham-fisted. Yep. And this idea that somehow Loomis was never told this, even though he spent 15 years with Michael, is fucking absurd.
Right. And especially after he breaks out. He breaks out and he starts heading to Haddonfield. And the doctor of Smith's Grove doesn't go, well, maybe he's going after Laurie. Like, doesn't even think about it.
Like, why did no one actually say anything to him?
I don't know.
It's so bizarre, man. And I really wish it had never happened in a way.
Yeah.
Only because it does feel weird ultimately that we have this kind of weird franchise debacle because of it, because now everything is trying to relate back to it for the next decade and a half.
Right. And not to say that there isn't great moments because of it.
Right.
There's some moments.
H2O has a great thing.
Yeah. And Jamie in Halloween also has a great moment. The moment where we'll talk about much later on in Halloween 5, where he like stops Michael and like gets Michael to stop kill. Does that for a moment because they have that connection or whatever. And it's like a very cool moment. But as it goes, those are all moments that are building off of a faulty tower, so to speak, a faulty base, because it just doesn't really make it. All we get out of that in Halloween 2 gets Loomis to come back, and we also get the cheesy flashback acid dreams that Laurie has about visiting her brother at some point, which, what the fuck is that all about? She's visiting, like the Strodes are going to bring her to visit Michael Myers at that point. That ain't going to happen. That ain't never happening. But it's weird. And also talking about, before you mentioned that Halloween had a TV edit, Halloween 2 also had a TV edit. And there's like a couple different versions of those dreams that really kind of like, so you don't even know what they want. One of them has her saying something like, Michael, don't be angry at me. I'm your sister. And it's like really hit you over the head kind of thing. But I
dislike psychic Jamie Lee Curtis. And
yeah,
I mean, I know that's a thing that later that they lean in on Halloween 4, obviously. And we'll get to that in the future too, because Jamie, the character,
right,
is psychically
has some kind of psychically linked, yeah.
So they continue that trend, but it's such a weird thing because it goes so supernaturally out of nowhere.
Right. And I think I definitely deal with that better in 4 with Jamie because Jamie removed from Laurie, and that's like, again, supernatural Michael is supposedly much more removed from the original Halloween, because the original Halloween is not supernatural, not meant to be supernatural for the most part. I mean, he's pure evil, but he's not like supernatural pure evil. And all of a sudden, like having him be more supernatural in 2 and making this whole supernatural thing coming out in 2 seems like a weird juxtaposition for a film that's continuing on exactly from the moments after the first film ended. The fourth film is years later. You can kind of like accept that a little easier and go, okay, let's see what this is where it's going to take me.
Right. So I don't know. We've kind of gone around the stuff that happens with the twist, so it leads them going back to the hospital to find Jamie Lee Curtis's Laurie. And here's the funny thing about this for me. Once they show up, Laurie can't scream loud enough, number one, to get anyone to notice that she's there.
And once she's gone,
she goes,
once they're gone, once they're gone in the door, all of a sudden, I can scream again.
Yeah, and then she goes to the door, and now the door doesn't open.
Right. They didn't lock it behind them as far as I know.
No. And so then she finally gets in, and my favorite is Loomis going, I'm so sorry I left you. Really? Because there was not a single part of me that believed that you even cared about what was happening to Laurie until you found out that she was Michael's sister.
Right. Why would he left? Why wouldn't he left? Because Michael was not there anymore. His goal is to get Michael, wasn't to save Laurie. I mean, saving Laurie was a happenstance of it. And like, not like he wanted Laurie dead, but his main goal was to get Michael. Michael wasn't there anymore. Of course he left her. Then you get the Michael walking into the. I mean, we skipped over a little bit of the Michael chasing Laurie around the darkened halls of the hospital a little bit, but not a whole lot happened there. It's kind of boring, to be honest with you, for Michael's talking. And as part of it is Michael's walk. To be honest with you, like the aforementioned Dick Warlock walk, like there's a difference between walking slowly and walking purposefully, but not running. And like Dick Warlock just doesn't walk purposefully. That's the issue. Like, he just kind of tends like. And to bring up your point that we mentioned yesterday, this is a guy who we're going to get to takes 6 shots in the chest, takes another 6 shots, ends up getting shot in the eyes, and still working through. What's going to stop this dude? The elevator door slamming on his hand. That's going to stop him.
That's my favorite moment of weirdness in this is that, like,
what?
He's chasing. Yeah, we kind of overdid. I hate the first time Laurie and Michael see each other again in this movie because it's kind of just awkward.
Yeah.
Like, Laurie turns and it should be good, but it's not. Like, it just kind of comes off as cheesy. Yeah. But, Laurie turns around and Michael's just kind of standing behind a nurse. Yeah. He's just kind of there. Kills the nurse, and then he's going after Laurie. And yeah, it's the elevator door that stops him. What a weird choice. Like, this dude took bullets. He's been, like, mutilated. He's fallen off of buildings. He's gone through some shit. But the elevator door. Yeah, that elevator door, it hurt his hand.
It's a kryptonite. It's just kryptonite right there.
Elevator doors. It's a silly moment. It's a silly moment in a silly movie. And again, I'll say this. There's some cool kills. We didn't really talk about the hot tub kill. That's a great kill in the movie. Yep. We talked about the bleeding out kill. That one's really great. Bud's death is kind of cool. I like it's out of focus and out of frame for a reason, but it's kind of fun. It's kind of cool. I wish that I cared at all about any of the rest of it, but at that
doctor's
point,
death with the ice pick in the brain or whatever, the nurse needle the brain out of there, and the nurse who gets a needle in the eye, that kind of thing. It's all kind of like fine. It's good. Yeah, good kills. I don't want to say anything bad about it, but it just didn't work because I didn't really care about the characters at all.
And I think that's kind of my big takeaway at the end of the day with this movie is I just don't give a shit about the characters, and that sucks.
Great.
I mean, I could keep going on about it. I do like the ending. As far as like this big Loomis taking, Well,
we forgot. I got to say, the funny thing is after Loomis shoots him, Michael. Or no, before Loomis shoots him, after Jamie Lee gets in, Michael decides that Jamie can't open the door. Michael can open the door. I'm just going to walk through the glass. Does he make it even move to strike the glass, or not even with his head? He just walks, and all of a sudden the glass breaks around him. It's so bad. It's so bad and laughable. Of course, dead Loomis shoots him, and then you get Nurse Chambers is thrown out there to go call on the radio. And I love this. Is the Marshall's I actually like the Marshall's. The actor who plays the Marshal, he has some good quips. He has some good line reads, even though he doesn't have much to do. Hey, I'm the only one that's allowed to use that radio or whatever. But he gets the naivety pull where he Loomis tells him not to go near him, but he does it. And he's hey, but he's not breathing anymore. Oh yeah, boom. The first time Michael returns and kills him. That leads us to the end where we do have the I don't even know what room it is, but there's a lot of gas in there, I guess.
A weird room. That's like, hey, we've got all these fucking gas tanks in one place. What a great place to kill Michael.
Exactly, that's what it is. Here's the funniest part, though. So Laurie gets a gun from Loomis. Laurie very hesitant to use the gun, but does have to when Loomis gets stabbed and knocked around a little bit. Shoots him in the eyes. Shoots him twice in the eyes. One in each eye.
What a great shot of the blood going down the mask.
It is a great shot, but it's ridiculous. The guy just got shot twice in the eyes, and he's like still like ready to go. There's a guy who got stopped by an elevator door, but I'm going to get shot twice in the eyes, and I'm like, I still got you, baby. Like, what the fuck is that? To be honest with you,
I'll say this: the funniest part about that to me, and I kind of texted you this, right, was this idea that ultimately Michael is like swinging around this knife that he has, right, and he's already seen Laurie. And he knows that she's on the ground below him, and yet he's swinging above. And I'm like, I don't care if you just got shot in the face, my guy. Like, you know she's below you. Why are you not swinging like downward? You're only swinging up above, and it's very confusing.
It's so funny. Well, then of course it's just enough for him to be taking distraction for us that they can all get the gas opens. Loomis sends Laurie out, and Loomis is going to go with him, and with the lighter he gets earlier in a weird kind of scene. I remember like Hunt gives him a cigarette, and then like he gives him the lighter, and Loomis goes, oh, and just keeps the lighter instead of giving it back. But it makes sense now because he has the lighter so that he can open it up, click it up, and blow up the room. And Loomis says, fuck them kids. Because we haven't seen the babies. That's why I said in my
But then he fucking blows up part of the hospital.
We have a hospital, like I don't know about patients, not many patients or staff, but there was a room full of babies that last time we saw them, when the nurse was telling Bud, I don't know if I can leave them. I have to leave the door open while we're fucking because I don't know if I can at least hear them call or cry or whatever. So then they do that. Bud and the nurse both die. This is like halfway, if not maybe a quarter way through the film, maybe halfway at best, and that's the last we see these babies. And these babies are killed. Are they killed or explodes the part of the hospital? I don't know. We don't know. Is that part of the 10 body count? Well, yeah, it seems to be a lot more if the babies are found. But this poor baby's got nothing for the rest of the night. Fuck them kids, Rosenthal says. We're blowing them up.
This movie has so many weird choices.
Yeah.
Just weird choices. That's the best way to describe it.
Mm-hmm.
Weird choices. Like, overall, man, I don't know. Like, it contradicts itself. It doesn't pay attention to itself. I have no other way. Are you getting a call? Do you need to take this call? Is it?
No, I don't.
What we're doing? You know what, PLD? I'm asking you to be professional.
I was declining the call. Did you hear the call? Is that what it was? I don't know.
Yeah. That was fine. I heard that. I heard it vibrating on your desk.
Oh, yeah. I was like, I had to decline it because nothing's more important than me talking about Michael Myers with the eyes bleeding down from 2 bullets in his brain, but yet he's still able to function. Continue.
Yeah, I mean, look, it's a good ending ultimately because this one is trying to feel really definitive where Carpenter is like, look, you all wanted a sequel. We gave you a sequel, but I genuinely do not want Michael to come back.
Yeah.
Genuinely, this is over. I'm going to blow him up. I'm going to shoot him in the eyes. And I'm taking Loomis with him while I'm at it. You know what I'm saying? Like, that's what he's going so far out of his way to be like, this is over.
Right.
Carpenter wants nothing more to do with Michael at all.
Loomis or anything. He's done.
And
no one else is going to take him either.
Yeah.
No one else is going to use him either.
He tries his best to be like, there's no coming back from this.
Right.
But as we both know, that is not the case.
Because you can't really fully ever kill Michael Myers.
Apparently. And we'll get to that once we get to Halloween 4. But, right. The movie ends. Laurie's in the back of the ambulance, and it just kind of ends with Mr. Sandman playing.
Very subtle.
It's fairly kind of just anticlimactic.
I shouldn't say subtle. Very abrupt is a better way to say it.
Yeah.
It's very abrupt.
It's totally abrupt. And
Michael's dead. Okay. I do like the use of the song there, though.
Yeah,
it makes it creepy. So I kind of approve of that. Not gonna lie.
That's one of the better moments.
Yeah.
Of the entire movie. But again, one of the weird things for me too is also, boy, I just find that this 90-minute movie takes forever.
Yep.
I find that the characters are not super interesting. I think it sidelines Laurie to its detriment. And I think it even sidelines Loomis to its detriment in other ways. So the truth is I said this earlier. It was the first time I watched this movie, and I kind of wish in a way it hadn't existed. And I say that because I'd almost like it better if we had never gotten the twist of the family thing being revealed. Because could you imagine if this hadn't happened and then they decided to do H2O? And then H2O is literally, Laurie is still scarred from it because it was a random event that happened. And then Michael shows up again and it starts all over where it's just that kind of nightmare, right?
Agreed.
This movie weirdly just kind of didn't sit right with me in a way that I had never fully felt before. And it's not that it's watchable. It's totally fine.
100%.
But it's not, it's just like a mid to low tier Halloween movie at this point. And that's because so many better versions of the movie kind of exist.
It's kind of generous to say that, I'll be honest with you. I will say that one of the most important parts of the film we haven't really talked about much, we very briefly went over it, that is partially responsible for ruining the film for me, is I don't mean to offend anybody. I always hate picking on somebody's work, but Alan Howarth joins John Carpenter in his score. And from the documentary I saw, it seemed less like John Carpenter had much to do with the score at all. It seemed like John Carpenter's original stuff was used, and then this Howarth guy kind of played a lot of stuff over the top of it. And it fucking ruined it for me. It was the Halloween theme in the first one was so simple, so chilling, so intricate in its own way, but very much a very simple piece. Whereas Howarth decides to make it more gothic and more epic and adds more reverb on top of it. And it just felt too heavy handed. And it kind of just didn't have nearly the same effect as the simplistic John's piano basic score worked and the synth score worked. So I like the idea of the score, but Alan Howarth is not something I'd rather see just a pure John Carpenter score.
Also, I gotta say, and I did bring this up and we didn't really talk about it, the other problem I have with the movie in general is that I find the lack of score really detrimental to the movie.
Yes.
Because the movie is very quiet a lot of the time, which sounds weird, but one of the things I love about the original is that the score feels kind of like a nightmarish heartbeat. It never really lets up. It's always kind of lingering. And they really go away from that in this. And then there's the 80s synth side to it that feels kind of odd. Right. And it feels a little, I don't want to say I want to say it just kind of feels out of place. It almost ages the movie the wrong way.
Agreed.
Which is not a thing that I normally feel about stuff like this, but something here just doesn't quite work.
Halloween 1 feels timeless still. I mean, it feels of the time, but I still feel like it could happen anywhere. Whereas Halloween 2 you feel that. You feel it partially the score. I think the score makes it feel more dated too. And it feels like it just, I don't know. I agree. It just doesn't feel quite right.
No, it really doesn't. And so again, it's just a weird choice. And I think that ultimately the biggest problem with this movie is that it's so clear Deborah Hill and John Carpenter didn't want this movie to be made.
Right.
It's clear that it was made by producers who just wanted to cash in on the success of all the other slasher stuff around it, but no one believed in the project.
Right.
The only one who showed up and believed in it was Pleasance, really.
Yeah.
And maybe Rosenthal to a point, but even then the movie was kind of taken away from it.
And Nancy Stevens, I'll give her that too.
Yeah.
It just, nothing about this really feels right. But I got to say, one thing I will say also is we're getting into the part where we're going to start ranking this film. I still feel overall that despite everything I've said, it's still not that bad. If that makes sense. There's a lot we picked on.
Yeah, we picked on it, but it's also, again, it's like totally middle of the road fine. Yeah. I think that in a vacuum, if the other movies didn't exist, it's a really fun follow-up in a lot of ways. It's unique in that it's trying to do it the night of still. Like, what a great tagline, more of the night he came home, right? Really setting the table for what it is. It's fun as an idea.
I feel like, I think that's part of what it is. I feel like the reason why we trash a little bit is because we think it should be better. It should be better with the crew that it has, the same people that it has. It's just not. But what are you going to do? What are you going to do?
And again, I think that just comes down to this was a movie that people didn't want really to be made.
Yeah.
And I think it shows. I said it last week. One of the things that would have made Halloween kind of live on in infamy is if it had just never been sequelized and the shape had just disappeared. And from there, we had only gotten stuff like Season of the Witch, and Halloween became an anthology series.
Right.
But as it turns out, that's not what people were interested in. They only wanted to show up for Michael and what was next. And look, that's cool too. It is.
Yeah.
100%. But I don't know. It's not a bad movie.
No,
but for me, it's not a very good follow-up either.
No,
in as time has gone on,
agreed,
and that's a bummer in a way because I used to really love Halloween 2, but I think that there is something about revisiting these movies and recontextualizing them and revisiting them to the point that you go, you know what? Time has not been nearly as kind to you because the franchise actually has gotten better in different ways.
True. Now, fun enough, one little tick here for us is that for the first time in 4 weeks, I'm fairly certain neither of us are going to put this a film at 11.
Definitely not.
It's
so funny that we literally had 4 weeks.
4 in a row. All Lord of the Rings and the original Halloween were all 11s for us. Because on PLD PJ, we always go from 1 to 11. So with that in mind, where do you think Halloween 2 rates? Now, we keep this in mind for our audience. We're not going to make these hard and fast ratings. If we get to like Halloween 5 and we want to rate, might retroactively go back and go, I'm going to change my ranking for Halloween 2 and move it up a little bit after comparisons. We can do that. We're allowed to do that. But as of right now, having just watched it, after watching Halloween as well, where are you ranking on 11?
Standardly fine. I'm gonna go 6.5. I think it's like a very nicely kind of middle ground area. Again, I think that there's movies in the franchise that are better. I think there's movies in the franchise that are worse. This is just kind of middle of the pack, and that rating kind of feels middle of the pack to me.
I get that. I think I'm gonna be lesser than you. I'm gonna be less than you for sure.
I thought about that, to be honest.
My initial gut instinct said 4.5. I think I can bump it up to that. I think I can bump it up in my brain to a 5, and that feels better. But at the end of the day, I can't do much more than a 5, which is just too many things to its detriment. That it's a little less than average to me. But a lot of films in the series are far worse than average. But the potential of Halloween 2, the potential behind it hurts. It hurts that it was so bad compared to the potential it had. Sometimes a movie is just bad and it never really had much potential in the first place. It's kind of like, okay, it is what it is. This I wanted to love. This has the right ingredients. Just didn't have enough care. And so I'm going to give it a 5. I'm going to stick with my guns and go with a 5.
I think it's fair. You know what? Actually, I'm going to go down to a 6. I'm still going to be higher than you. I can't get too hard because I think that we're going to get to movies in this franchise I really just do not care for.
Agreed.
And they're so much worse. But
yeah.
I think the big thing now is that in hindsight, and I think a part of this is also the more that I read into the production and the more that I read into, we're both reading that Taking Shape 2 book of dealing with lost sequels and things like that. And it really hones in on what happened though with Halloween 2 and 3 in particular, leading into all these lost sequels. it really kind of changed the way I looked at the movie. And I think this was the first time with all that in mind that I really went, oh, wow, it really doesn't feel like people want to be here.
Right. I get that. Absolutely. And Taking Shape is a great book. It's 2 books. There's Taking Shape, Developing Halloween from Script to Screen by Dustin McNeil and Travis Mullins, and the sequel, Taking Shape 2, the Lost Halloween sequel, which we both agree are very amazing reads and did probably color my view a little bit. We got a lot of the background information leading up to it, some of the choices that were made. And not only that, this will lead into our podcast we're doing for our Patreon, where we go into the actual Lost sequels. We're going to talk about the sequels that were developed for certain ones. It starts with Halloween 4, so we're going to wait until we get through Halloween 4. Then we'll start doing the bonus Patreon bonus episode where we concentrate on what might have been in the Halloween universe. It's fun. It's fun to go into that kind of stuff. And at the end of the day, even though I ranked it to 5 and you ranked it to 6, a bad Halloween film is still a Halloween film.
Yeah. There's
always stuff to have, so stuff to enjoy as we do. So that's where I think we can end at this point. So, PJ, where can the folks find you?
You guys can find me, Twitter, Instagram, PJ_Campbell. And, check out the Movie Trivia Schmodown for the next, couple of months until it's over. We talked a little bit about that last week, and, the idea that it's over and it's weird and we're still getting used to that idea, but enjoy the last few episodes. We still have a lot of good matches coming up, stuff that PLD and I are super proud of writing wise. So, check it out and go over to YouTube, subscribe to the PJ Campbell Network. We're bringing it back. Well, I'm bringing it back anyway, and it's going to be a lot of fun. I've got some cool stuff brewing. So we'll see you guys over there.
Tell them hell's coming and you're bringing me with you, PJ.
Pretty much. Yeah.
You can find me at Paul_Danuzzi on Twitter. You can find me on PLD Projects on YouTube, where I do class action every week with Richard Jarvie and Maddie Gunner, which every week you take 2 things. It would be actors, franchises, movies, directors, put them up against each other, come up with some cool categories, and see who in a battle of who to the death, which is victorious. I'm going to be starting up season 2 of Crown Jewels on the Spotify feed here. That's a funny thing. If you subscribe to the PLD Project, you're getting both this show and the Crown Jewels one. So I figured it was actually cheaper to do that way. Hopefully it's not too many, doesn't bother too many people. I keep the cover art for each podcast different.
I think it's the right thing to do. You have all your content on one stream. It just makes sense.
And you can always, if you don't like the Queen one, just want to hear us talk, you can just skip it. And if you don't like us, I don't know why you wouldn't, and just want to hear about Queen, I can do that.
Look, if people are hate listening, I applaud it. Thank you.
Okay, that's it. Yeah,
listens or listens.
That's right. That's true. And feel free to contact me and let me know about that. But if you really want to yell at me and get deep into my psyche, join me at patreon.com/PLD Projects. A bunch of people, you can join them, such as Danielle Ramirez, Brandon Buckingham, Bernie Parker, Jeff Alsterman, John Lastrina, Kelly W., and others. We do extra content for you. We talk about Doctor Who. We're going to have the upcoming, like I said, Lost sequels to Halloween. I'm going to try to do some more Queen stuff as well. We have some hangouts we do. It's a great bunch of people. Facebook chat we have all the time, talking movies, talking everything. Great bunch of people. A lot of fun. And I think that'll do it for now. Until next time, I guess. Is there anything else you need to say? I don't think so.
No, man, I think we kind of covered it. Thank you guys so much, as always, for your continued support. We love all of you.
Stay mediocre,
Until next
guys.
time, stay mediocre.
Never underestimate the power of mediocrity.